You'd think by now people would have forgotten, or perhaps decided simply to let go of the memory of what happened in the Mississippi Delta town of Leland in the early afternoon of November 17, 1948. But nobody has. Even people too young to remember know about it. They've seen clippings pasted in old scrapbooks or heard the story, which did not, by the way, end that year or the next, but went on and on. One of those stories that, because people love to tell it, keeps starting over. Although some local residents still refuse to engage, even briefly, in a discussion of the matter, there are those who would, if you went to Leland, gladly point out the house where it happened, still standing, freshly painted, perfectly white, lawn exquisitely maintained. They might even be willing to tell you exactly where in the house the 68-year-old society matron was attacked, first in the enclosed back porch and then dragged on a small rug into her own bathroom where she, or more than likely her body, ended up face down, her daughter said, in her own blood soup, the crown of her head against the tub beside which sat an ordinary three-legged wooden stool, and between the stool and her head, the gleaming nightmare weapon, washed and wiped clean of prints and gore. That it happened was shocking enough on its own, but there, in that neighborhood, until that year, both of these women, the society matron mother and the socialite daughter, had lived pretty much their whole lives on this street, which, it is important to note, was and still is the most desirable in town. The street about which locals say, if you want to get to heaven, you have to live on Deer Creek Drive. Or, as some would say, simply, the Drive. If by happenstance you did find yourself in Leland, standing before the murder house, you might then want to check out the house where the dead woman's daughter lived with her cotton broker husband and two young daughters, a mere 3 houses away down the drive, north toward Stoneville. You could walk there in minutes, noting as you went, thanks in great measure to the Leland Garden Club, the beauty of the surroundings, the meandering creek to your left, and on its high sloping banks, the oak and sycamore trees, the occasional surviving sweet gum, the crepe myrtle and pecan, the azalea and rose bushes, the park benches, the well-fed families of proprietary ducks. That the two women's homes were situated on what some Leland families consider the wrong side of the creek should also be noted. It is, of course, a measure of small-town snobbery that there exists to some a bad side of the best street in town, but the distinction is also significant in terms of current property values. Houses on South Deer Creek Drive, according to a longtime realtor and lifelong resident, command a higher price. Asked why this was, she answered with a sigh, as if the reason should have been obvious. Because, she said, Black people live on the north side. Close to or on? These days, both. It was 2018. I'd returned to the Delta to participate in the annual Hot Tamale Festival, which took place in downtown Greenville. The realtor was driving me around Leland, pointing out places of historical interest, including a museum devoted to Kermit the Frog and his creator, the puppeteer Jim Henson, surely Leland's best-known resident, more famous even than the blues men James Son Thomas and Johnny Winter. She'd promised to get me into the murder house, which she'd personally sold 5 times since the killing. But when we drove there and she went inside to ask, the current residents told her, no way.